Welcome to Eureka. I am Gohar Raza and you are watching Eureka. There was a period when India was still under British rule. Small number of very brilliant scientists started dreaming like any other Indian of a free India. But they were worried how this India is going to look like. And they argued when we get independence, at that time we'll require our own scientists, trained minds, creative enough to build a new India. And among them was Dr. Homi Jahangir Bhabha, who came to India on a vacation, but because of the war, he stayed back. He dreamt of atomic energy as the prime mover of energy in India. He dreamt of a large installation which was created by many scientists, and then a whole generation of scientists were inspired to work in the high energy physics, and without understanding that physics, you couldn't build a modern India. Today, we have a special guest with us, Dr. R.K. Sinha. You are sitting on a chair where the most brilliant mind has sat. How did you feel when you first time sat on that chair? Did it humble you? Did it inspire you to do more? Did you feel more responsible? Were your hands shaking?
Well, I'm fully aware, even on that day I was aware the kind of responsibility attached to this chair. And thanks to the foundations laid by my predecessor, I felt quite comfortable and confident. Then the legacy which I inherit will continue to be carried forward. So I would say I was quite comfortable, of course overwhelmed and humbled of the importance of that occasion.
Dr. Homi Jahangir Bhabha left a legacy, as you were saying, followed by many scientists and the most brilliant mind, which inculcated, you rightly said, the confidence in the younger generation. You must have heard a lot of stories about these great people. Which one do you remember most, and which one did you inspire you most?
Well, of course, I have read a lot about Dr. Homi Jahangir Bhabha. I joined the department after six years after his demise. But the most inspiring part of his life history, which I have studied in detail, was that when in the year 1944, he proposed to set up an institution called Institute of Fundamental Research. I thought at that time, India was fighting hunger. You know that Great Bengal famine was just behind. Hunger, poverty, many things to worry about from where the next day's meal is going to come. And nuclear sciences were so nascent, right from the discovery of fission, which happened only around 38, 39. But the things moved very fast enough. Of course, the first nuclear reactor, Chicago Pile, and followed by Hiroshima and Nagasaki, these things happened, discovery of plutonium. These things all happened within a span of less than 10 years.
Lots of activity across
the world. And here was a man who could clearly see the role of this tremendous source of energy in more ways than one. And not only he could be, as a scientist, well capable of realizing its full potential, he was a visionary who felt for India.
A lot of people also opposed, because people said that the political leadership should take steps to quench the hunger of the people instead of investing so much of money in things like atomic energy.
Exactly. And but look at the mind of this great individual who thought beyond the common man, not today, but he thought of 10 years from now. In fact, he made a statement in his proposal to the Dorabji Tata Trust. He wrote a note seeking some funds for this. He said to the effect that 2 decades from now, when India launches a program for atomic energy, it will not be found lacking for its own, for manpower, to people, expert people who will be handling these projects. And look, how visionary was this statement actually, 2 years.
And it's a great organization now today. Thousands of people are working. It has always attracted best of the mind from area of physics, mechanical engineering, electrical engineering, and many other fields, including doctors. Some of the brightest of the doctors have joined you. Now, this achievement, we don't see in many other areas of science. What was the key to this achievement?
Well, I would say that you actually spelled it out. Human resource is the most precious asset any organization can claim to have. And that's what Dr. Bhabha, I think he had the very first priority to establish the BARC training school. Of course, it was not called BARC at that time, it was a training school for human resource development. He was very clear about what kind of people should be admitted for such training, and that tradition we maintain till today. There are no set number of vacancies and posts. Of course, we have to maintain within ourselves within a ceiling, no doubt about it, but there is no dilution of standards. Every year we do go through the selection process, and more or less the tradition set in 1957 when the first batch graduated has been maintained till today. Because of this reason, when the challenges do occur, we have the people who are our assets, who can take care of the challenges to meet, because the fundamental the guideline for all our activities are three of them: excellence, self-reliance and relevance. All three together, in my view, we have to be excellence, world-class technology, world-class science, world-class research.
And you have never compromised on that.
We have never compromised on that. But also self-reliance. In case we are not able to get the best from the world and there is a need, that's where the relevance comes into picture. We do the things ourselves. And that's what when Bhabha, way back in 56, in fact our department is now 60 years old. We started our journey in August 2014 and 3rd August 2014. So now we are in the Diamond Jubilee year. So during these 60 years, we have gone through a lot of historical turmoils, after 74 Pokhran experiment. We suffered the technology denial regime. How did we survive? There are other comparable countries.
Even initially, people were not ready to give us know-how. And as Dr. Homi Sethna once mentioned, that most of the scientists who were inducted by Dr. Homi Jahangir Bhabha, including himself, did not know anything about the material, did not know initially about the designs, they did not know anything about how to operationalize the knowledge that they had of physics. Yet they did it. They could do it. What inspired them to take such challenges? How did they do it in the face of denial of information and technology? That amazes me.
So basically, I would say intelligence is like a torch. If you find a darkness somewhere, you have to shine it, and then you can find your way out of a bad situation, because you are able to see the way the path should lead to. So same way, I think when the challenges came our way, just because of the strength of knowledge and a zeal to go ahead and move faster than what we did yesterday, I think has carried us forward. And you gave a good example of Dr. Homi Sethna. In fact, we celebrated 50 years of the plutonium plant. He was the project director of that important project, which led to our mastery of the technology for reprocessing of the fuel to get the plutonium, which is so vital for our fast breeder reactor program. So those were the days when such projects could be completed very quickly also. And in fact, sometimes even now I realize how quickly they could build the Apsara reactor and set up the plutonium plant. Today, of course, we need to go through several steps and processes, but still I feel those days they took care of all the safety, everything, nothing has happened so far, but the speed really amazes me even today, and it's an example for us to follow forever.
We'll come back to fast breeder reactor because that is the flagship program. I have to take a break. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back soon. Welcome back. We have a special guest today, Dr. R.K. Sinha, Chairman, Atomic Energy Commission. Dr. Sinha, we were discussing how the switchover from traditional reactors to fast breeder reactors came Why was fast breeder reactors so important?
Well, you see, the energy demand in our country, consistent with its population, is very large. In spite of our good effort made for setting up electricity generating plants of different kinds in the country, still we are less than 1/5 of the world average, around 1/5 of the world average, and we have to travel a long distance. Now, we have seen that in order to make our way into a elite club of a developed country, we need to have a certain per capita electricity generation. It should be typically, in my view, of the order of 4,000 to 5,000 kilowatt hour per person per year. To be able to reach there, there is no way we can march into that exclusive club unless either we keep on importing fuel resources from rest of the world perpetually. We do not have uranium also at this stage particularly. Our uranium resources are of rather poor grade, and those which are known to be available, they cannot provide us enough fuel.
About 200,000 ton, which is very small.
200,000 ton is in situ, underground.
Right.
When we try to convert it to mines, you have to look at the concentration and the grade, and whether there are various parts are concentrated in one area. Are there any environmental concerns, for that matter, tiger reserves?
We do not.
There are various factors. I would say that actual availability is lower than that, what has been found. So you can't really go far with that. What is most important for our country? We cannot be depending upon external sources of such strategic resources forever. We will be vulnerable. We are not a small country which can buy and keep in stock for a long time.
And we have seen in the past how vulnerable we can become once there are sanctions.
So therefore, it is very important for us to make best use of the resources we have got. What we have, plenty of sunshine, wind power here and there, and plenty of thorium. That is all I can count on. That is what Bhabha counted on. That's where all my predecessors have counted on, and that's where entire department has been banking upon a philosophy to reach out from where we stand today to the thorium. To be able to reach there, it is important that we go through the fast breeder route. With the limited uranium, if we are able to make use of the uranium in existing reactor types which are now under operation, but not throw them out after the spent fuel comes out, make use of more than 99% of uranium which is otherwise not fissionable. We remove the part of which has been converted to plutonium. Plutonium is a man-made fissile material.
Correct.
Then our reprocessing plants where this spent fuel goes, it becomes like another mine. It is a man-made mine to remove a man-made fissile material which is a substitute for uranium. If you look at that from this angle, we need to increase the throughput of these mines as much as possible. That is where the fast breeder reactor comes, as much as possible, as fast as possible. That is where breeding comes into picture. You need to design reactors in such a manner that they produce more plutonium than they consume. So in fast breeder reactor, exactly that we do.
We learned from French in the initial stages, and then there was sanction, and then we improved upon the technology. Would you like to tell something about that? Because that is where we excel as compared to any other country in the world.
Yeah, it's also a very interesting story around that, because of course the French have been a great friends to us, and after 1974 naturally there were certain concerns in different parts of the world about our capabilities and our record. Well, the fast breeder test reactor technology came from French. It was also expected that the nuclear fuel for that would also be coming as a part of the contract. However, following the technology denial regime, there was a restraint on getting that kind of a fuel from the French. This reactor was to run on a mix of high enriched uranium. Actually, it is a highly enriched uranium fuel.
And there was no uranium now, almost stopped.
No, actually, we didn't have enrichment technologies in the late 70s when this project was being made. And of course, we are working on that, but now we have got that technology. But at that time, it was not there. All we had got a reprocessing plant in Trombay, and based on that, plutonium was available to us. So therefore, we felt, can we make a nuclear fuel which will work on this man-made fissile material which is substitute for the natural uranium and enriched uranium? We created sort of a world record by using this nuclear fuel to reach very high levels of burn-up. Burn-up means per ton of uranium, per ton of heavy metal, how much energy has been drawn from the fuel before you decide to take it away. It reached to a maximum of 160,000.
This is a measure of very high efficiency.
Very high efficiency. It is at more than 4 times the traditional numbers which we see from existing reactor types operational in the world.
And this was done for the first time in the world. This technology was developed here indigenously, and it was done for the first time, and it's been running. Now, we are at the threshold where we are going to have second phase of nuclear energy starting now. There are 2 questions related to it. One is that what is this second phase? And the second one is that this second phase was conceived long back. Why did it get delayed? We did very well. We are at the same technological and scientific level as any other country is in building reactors. A long tradition of building reactors. Why was this delayed, and what is this phase?
Of course, there were slow down processes because of technology denial regime, as I mentioned already to you. Our pace of growth in the first stage itself got slowed down. I would say the Rajasthan Atomic Power Station Unit 1 was constructed, commissioned and started to operate when there was a 1974 test occurred, and there was an imposition of technology denial regime.
People said we will not give you this technology, and yet we commissioned that.
So unit 2 took at least 6 years longer to complete. When we are building the prototype fast breeder reactor, there were only 2 such reactors under construction. One was India, other was in the Russian Federation. Russian Federation reactor is just about completed. I think it has become critical very recently. Of course, technology is complex. It must be made sure that it will work. So we had done a lot of work in our Indira Gandhi Center for Atomic Research to develop technology. If you are visiting there, you will find out how many loops have been made to run with sodium at very high temperatures. Most of the components.
We also optimized on the loops.
Yes, we did. Then most of the components which needed to be manufactured for the first time, what Indira Gandhi Center did, that first they made a prototype, more or less simulating their scales, got them made first by the industry, made sure they work, made sure they are able to manufacture to the required quality standards. Then as a part of the prototype fast breeder reactor components ordered by Bhavani, they were sent out. So this was a learning phase in my view, which was very important. See, you can't make a reactor and start learning on the way. It has to be done upfront. That's why there were delays in launch of this project. After launch of the project, again, Indian industries, definitely for them, it was first of a kind job. So these did take a little longer time. So our ambition is that the prototype fast breeder reactor, by its very name prototype, is the first of a kind. We tolerate these delays. The next 2 reactors, which are fast breeder reactors 1 and 2, which will come up after some time, they will be fully commercial scale, completed in the time frame which is stipulated for their construction, no time and cost overruns in their case. So that would be the place to ask me questions why you got delayed or otherwise. This was a learning cum technology demonstration phase. I think we have done reasonably well.
We'll continue the discussion. Don't go anywhere. We'll come back soon. Welcome back to Eureka. Dr. Sinha, we were discussing how we have mastered and how during the denial regime, when world decided not to give us technology, not to talk to us, we've come a long way. Now the world is ready to talk to us because we have excelled in this area. So do we conclude that in areas like space and atomic energy, where world said, no, we'll not talk to you, we excelled, so it was a good thing?
Yeah, I would say so. In fact, in many of our speeches, I keep telling that if the escape door is closed and you see an adversary coming from the only door, you will go and fight with him. So that's what we did, and you can see, I think the entire self-reliance, first of all, it was facilitated by 2 things, I must say so. Attention to human resource development and complete support of the government right from day one.
It was also political will of the country to do well.
Exactly. So we got full support to be able to, as you said.
Don't you think it was a very difficult decision for political leadership at that time to invest in science, and that too in an area which may not give results?
The country's needs in the future, which one has to definitely keep in mind when you sit in that high chair. I can see no other way to meet these needs. In fact, the first 12 top GDP countries in the world, they all bank upon nuclear energy in one form or the other. And therefore, it is important for us, it was important for us then, it is important for us now to consider this as an important option. I have mentioned in some of my international writings that right since 85, there has not been any growth in the number of countries which has at any point of time started constructing a nuclear reactor. It stayed put, I think, at 33 with China. Afterwards, no new country joined till very recently in Gulf we started having this construction. Why? In IAEA, as chairman of one of the important committees, we collected data as to how many countries are interested in setting up nuclear power in their countries. It turned out at least 40 other countries were more than willing to set it up, but they were not able to do it because of lack of access to the technology and lot of concerns on the other parts, particularly from proliferation consideration, whatever consideration. So because we happened to reach there faster, we were in a leadership role. We could do it ourselves. All the technology came our way. I think it was a very brilliant and important decision which was taken at that point of time.
You stood first as a student in Patna University, and then you took this career. You could have been mechanical engineer in any other industry, and you would have done brilliantly. What was the moment of eureka in life during this career? You've grown with Bhabha Atomic Research Center, you've seen things changing, you have dreamt of very advanced India, and you have also dreamt of your contribution towards it. What was the moment of eureka?
There have been a lot of moments of this kind. Of course, I started my career right in the field when the Dhruva research reactor was under construction, completely indigenous design, all manufacturing done within the country. I was made responsible for development of some of the components which go inside the reactor. First of the kind things, everywhere we encounter first of a kind challenges, we went through that. But if you ask me a question as to which was the most thrilling moment of my life, one of the first moments of this nature I would count as my handling of the problem which occurred in Madras Atomic Power Station units 1 and 2 in 88-89. It had happened that the moderator inlet manifold, which brings in huge quantity of heavy water into the reactor. So this was a big challenge because inside the reactor things have failed. The passage which is now provided for bringing the moderator inside is no longer available. How to handle the situation? Two problems in there. We have to provide an alternate passage, but before that we have to remove those pieces. It was that part of job, removal of the pieces, which I think.
And it's highly contaminated area?
Extremely radiation, high radiable levels of radiation, 10 to the power 6 rad per hour, which is extremely high. So we had in parallel in BARC developed our own devices to handle the situation. And it did turn out that we were ready at the same time, and the foreigners also arrived with their gadgets at the Madras port. Since we were just a little ahead of them when reaching the site, we were offered one of the reactors to start working, and immediately we worked on that. We put our gadget, one end there was a manipulator put, other end the camera was put. We could see what is going inside. We lifted the pieces and as planned shifted it to one part of the reactor and dropped it there. That part of the reactor was not participating in the normal flow process, it was allowed. We did both of them. Then the time came to go to the second reactor. By then the foreigners had also arrived on the scene, and a conscious decision was taken by the then management of Nuclear Power Corporation. I think a very wise decision that having invited them, we should give them an opportunity because anyway bill has to be paid. So they did start the work, and it turns out that they didn't handle. They started with the toughest part. They couldn't budget. They went to the second and third part. There were 3 pieces lying. They could handle it. And when it came to first part, they struggled for another half day, and then they gave up. And then they told.
Then the responsibility lied on you.
Mr. Sinha, you have your manipulator. We can't do it. Can you try? I said, yeah, can you just help me a little? You have put your camera from the other end. I have my camera, but it will take me time unnecessarily. You remove your manipulator, allow me to look at through your camera. And that's how we did it. And it was a moment of great joy for us. These 2 reactors, we have a special attachment. It was practically given up for gone. Now it is ready to, it is able to produce 400 megawatt notionally full power. So that's where.
Of course, it's a big service to nation that the 2 power plants who were almost lost were regenerated. One of the problems that is associated with atomic energy has been high pressure on scientists because they cannot commit a mistake. The tolerances are very, very low. The other is the pressure from the public, that there is mistrust about efficacy and usability of atomic energy. How do you cope up with the two?
In our entire history of operation, I think now we are 400 reactor years of operation in the country. Not a single incident had taken place which had led to release of radiation outside the plant. So, I think we are quite perfect as far as the technology is concerned. Yes, public opinion is a different matter. Particularly after the Fukushima accident, I have noticed, because of the large coverage in the media and the dramatic way the events manifested themselves, naturally public has been concerned. I agree with them, we should be concerned. But the whole point is, as far as the technology is concerned, technology still is robust. There it manifested into an accident, but I do not see any way our reactors can suffer that accident. The severe natural events which can take place at any one of our sites, we have revisited the scenarios after the Fukushima accident once again, and quite comfortably we can see that our reactors are much more than equipped to handle any severe accident, that any severe external event that can take.
And the last question, that scientists require encouragement. One is recognition of their work. Which one of your awards do you remember and relish most?
Well, the first one was Homi Bhabha Science and Technology Award. It was an award for the year 92, which I received in 94. I think I will consider it one of the most significant recognitions I received, because that was the year when these awards were instituted. Homi Bhabha Science and Technology.
And you were the first to receive.
I was the first. And there was just one such award that year, and I was the first to receive. So, I can count myself as a fortunate one, and perhaps that recognition was something which I cherish.
Thank you very much for giving time.
Thank you very much.
I'm sure that a lot of young scientists, budding ones, are going to be inspired by this conversation. I'm sure you will answer the questions if we receive from our viewers, and I can on your behalf confidently say that write to eurekarstv@gmail.com any of your concerns, questions or suggestions. We'll pass them on to Dr. Sinha. It's only that much today. We'll come back with one more budding scientist next time, next week. Thank you very much for watching.